an enemy of the state, and then the SS
he's
would
like a wrecker. He's a
they'd kidnap you.
It was usually commies that would call him wreckers.
They would disappear you anyway. The SS would. People would say, "Oh, you know what? I don't like Joe. I'm going to report him." The SS, and then Joe would disappear because I had reported that he did something. So think about this. You are wondering if a high-level official is maybe not as loyal as you think he is and might be feeding information. It would actually be really informative and useful to be able to, if you could control the thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Focus on that guy and say, I know that in this time frame of, let's say, 2 months, he did some kind of off stuff. So let's just watch what he did and see if he did anything that wasn't right. And then we have proof, and we don't need to prove it in a court of law. We just know that we're right.
Yeah, the question is could it's tough enough to see in the past, but in say you're there and you were there in your secret factory and you're looking into the past, I would think you'd only be able to see into the past in your location.
Well, now you're putting parameters on it. We don't know what this thing could do.
Yeah,
I'm saying,
maybe
what if I could,
maybe you could tune it to go to any location in the past. Maybe you can
tune it whenever and wherever I want it.
I gotta say, I'm impressed with those Nazis because I mean that's pretty amazing.
Me too, and I also don't have the sense, I'm not by any means a Nazi historian. I don't know a whole lot about this kind of time in history or anything like that, but the impression that I have is not overwhelmingly that Nazis cared about individual life. I mean, I think that's kind of the idea of communism is for the greater good, right? So barring a high level ranking officer, right? But 9 times out of 10, if I go report Joe and he gets disappeared, I don't have the impression that they're going to be all right, we're going to turn on this machine and look into the past and see if you actually did this thing, more than they're just going to be wow, a bullet's super cheap.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's say it's
no. I first of all, I mean, the Nazis were socialists.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah.
So so they thought that what they were doing was for the greater good too.
Right.
I mean, just like the communists did. And so, but it's like it always seems to be the way with commies and socialists is that it's always, well, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
Exactly.
So,
that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. So they get crushed underfoot. But nonetheless, even in Nazi Germany, even though they're a heartless bunch, they still can't kill everybody.
No, you can't kill everybody.
Stalin, for example, found out that murdering his entire officer corps in the army didn't really serve him well, in World War II. It's like all the competent people that could actually save my country from the invaders. Well, I had them executed or sent to the gulag. Oops.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right, and of course, if that was a big thing, if that's what we're saying it was used for, is to exonerate higher ranking officers.
Well, it would also,
I am on board.
Well, it'd be a great spy tool as well.
Oh, it would be.
I want to see what the President of the United States was doing, and let's say I just tuned it in to 2 minutes ago for him and just watches it. So I've got a 2-minute delay on what the President of the United States conversation is.
All right, I'm on board now.
I remember.
believe it, but it's a freaking cool idea.
No, I remember when I was a kid, I used to read a lot more sci-fi than I do today, and Isaac Asimov wrote a story that was about this machine that this guy built that could look into the past. He could look, he could look into the past and anywhere, and it was really, really cool. But the thing about it is that every time somebody came up with this technology, government agents would show up and take it away. And so this guy, he had these government agents after him. So he just takes this and he basically puts the whole thing out in public. He publishes everything about it so that anybody can build one of these things. And then the government agents say, you can look 100 years into the past, or you can look 2 minutes into the past. What you've just done is you've just destroyed everybody's privacy. Welcome to the future. Hole. Yeah. And so it was kind of a nice twist on the story.
What a jerk.
Yeah. What a bozo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, let's
that was
that's a little off topic.
Yeah. For kind of a silly little theory. Another theory put out there is that it was a heavy particle accelerator, and they were using it to create weapons grade U-233, which is uranium. Yeah, so apparently there's people that have claimed that it has some sort of special acceleration process. There are these small particle accelerators that are called cyclotrons. That's kind of, if you don't want to have a linear accelerator that's half a mile long, you can use a cyclotron, which moves the particle in a spiral outward from the center, and it builds up speed. And then you can, like, you know, smash particles into other particles and achieve fusion or fission or whatever it is you're trying to do. Among this theory is that they were trying to convert thorium-232 into uranium-233.
I don't know what any of those things mean.
Yeah, well...
Is this me being an idiot? This is me being an idiot.
No, this is...
Or is this complex
This is
chemistry?
complex. This is
Okay.
complex chemistry.
Yeah.
I think the simple version is they were trying to take... What was the first one again, Joe?
Thorium-232.
Thorium, and they were trying to create uranium, which is then weapons grade, correct?
Yeah.
So they were trying to turn it into weapons grade uranium, and if this thing was a particle accelerator, again, this is my understanding of the science, and I'm not a mathematician or a scientist, but it has something to do with spinning at that velocity. You break off, I can't remember if it's I think it's electrons.
Yeah, the electrons break away from the nuclei.
Yeah,
and wind up
and so they
spinning around.
recombine and slam together and then form a new element.
Yeah, like the Large Hadron Collider.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah, well, I think that specifically what is vaporized mercury spins in a magnetic field, and the electrons become excited and disassociate from their atomic nuclei. They swirl around rapidly in a sort of a plasma inside this, and as they hit protons, they emit X-rays. This is, I have no idea, I'm not a physicist, but this is the way I've heard it described as the theoretical way that the bell could have worked.
So that would explain the thing.
Yeah, so it generates X-rays, and then the X-rays, when the X-rays hit beryllium supposedly does what's called donating. It donates neutrons, and so basically,
Donates.
yeah, exactly. He's going to donate. So essentially,
I need a deduction on my taxes.
Yeah.
I'm going to donate an electron.
no, I think beryllium is very generous. I don't think we should make fun of it.
Yeah.
So apparently, under this theory, they were trying to use fusion to basically add protons and neutrons to thorium-232 to transform it to uranium-233.
So this is a better way to generate weapons grade.
Supposedly, I guess they were looking
Supposedly a simpler way.
a quicker,
Easy.
easier shortcut to create U-233.
Or maybe even
Yeah.
a way like in the field to create it.
Well, there's no point in creating it in the field, though.
That's true.
Yeah, but...
You create it and then you just like squirt gun it
That's a good point.
at the other guys, and then
Yeah.
they're like, the X-rays are, my skin is
burns.
melting.
Yeah. So
Worst
anyway.
super soaker party ever.
No.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, the heavy particle accelerator is probably one of the more credible theories. Certainly it beats. I think it beats the time machine by a little bit.
I agree.
Yeah.
I
Beats
agree.
the anti-gravity device by not quite so much, but also by a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a fourth theory.
What's that?
It was a bell.
Oh.
Please tell me the uses of the Nazi bell.
It rings. Calls people to church. It's like, that's the Nazi bell. So, so you guys have been doing a little independent research on this yourselves, I assume.
Yeah.
Have you
Well,
come up
not
with
me.
any other credible theories for this?
I mean, I would say that my only other credible theory is that it's a made-up thing. It doesn't actually exist.
Well, we'll talk about that.
Oh, okay.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, the origins of it, of course, was the Polish author Igor Witkowski, as we talked about earlier, wrote The Truth About the Wunderwaffe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it got wider play when Nick Cook published his book, The Hunt for Zero Point.
A couple years later, right?
Yeah.
And he probably sourced a lot of his information, if not all of it, from
Witkowski. Yeah. And he says he found it incredible and believable. So a guy named Kurt Kleiner wrote a review of The Hunt for Zero Point.
Uh-huh.
And here's what he had to say about Cook's reliance on Witkowski. It's a little bit scathing. It's like, in a subtle sort of way. So why does Cook believe Witkowski? I'm quoting now. Witkowski had been recommended to me by Polish sources. Now I'm quoting Nick Cook. Through my work at Jane's as someone who was both highly knowledgeable and reliable, had Witkowski been in any way a lightweight, I would have turned around and got on the first plane home. But when I saw him, I knew he was okay. Unquote. Just as shaky are most of Cook's conclusions. So anyway, so quoting from...
He just
Cook,
keeps
Cook.
going. This
I don't wanna-
is a big review, and
I don't
want
want to but it kind of rips on Cook just a little bit. and yeah, you guys should read the review. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But so he relied very heavily on Wachowski's story. I don't know, and he claims that he was able to go because he spends a lot. He's supposedly kind of an expert on black programs, and black programs being the stuff that's in the black budget, the stuff that's hidden in the budget that you don't know about.
Right.
Things like the stealth bomber, for example, the stealth fighter. So he claims that by looking at our black budgets and stuff, he's been able to find huge gaping holes where he can infer lots of anti-gravity research and maybe, monkeying with the bellows going on. But there's a lot of big extrapolations going on there. He doesn't actually have access to that much information about that stuff, and so he relies on guys like Igor Witkowski. So anyway, back to Witkowski's. There's a little problem with his story, which is Jacob Sporenberg, who was indeed a German, high-ranking German SS soldier. And of course, it was Jacob Sporenberg was the guy that Polish intelligence supposedly interrogated and made a transcript of the interrogation, and then Witkowski got to read that.
Right.
And he talked about the bell.
Right.
So he was a soldier. He wasn't a scientist. He spent most of the war fighting partisans in Belarus and in Poland, and eventually wound up in Norway, where he was captured by the British. Let me throw up a map real quick, here. Well, first of all, down here, this is the valley where all that secret stuff is going on in those vast complexes.
On the border of the Czech Republic and
Poland. On the border of the Czech Republic and not too far east of Germany. Sporenberg was initially stationed in Minsk in Belarus, which is, 800 to 1,000 miles northeast of there.
Yeah.
And eventually he was stationed in Lublin, Poland, which is several hundred miles to the east of where the bell would have been. And then after that, wound up in Norway. It doesn't appear to me from his biography anyway, unless they cleverly cut some stuff out. Number one, it didn't appear that he physically got anywhere close to the bell. And also, there's no particular reason why he would have been, because he was a soldier.
Yeah.
And basically kind of,
Didn't have a reason to be there.
had no reason to be there, really, and if he was, say, down there for any reason, it's not like somebody's going to take him aside and say, hey, check out this really cool anti-gravity thing we're working on.
Well, I don't know. You could be another soldier trying to impress him. Hey, buddy, you're not going to believe what I found.
What it kind of sounds like to me is, if you couldn't tell, I've never been to war. I've never been a soldier, but I have the impression that there's a lot of kind of BSing and storytelling, almost like campfire storytelling that happens.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're in the trenches of an awful war,
Yep.
And it's human nature to kind of make up these stories.
Yeah.
Pass
and I
the
think
time.
often you want to make up stories about this awesome new technology that you have, the people you are fighting for have, that's going to help you win a war. And so it's totally possible this guy heard somebody who was like, oh man, you know what I saw recently? Or this scientist dude told me they've been working on. And it was just kind of a campfire story.
Yeah, but at the same time,
he got captured and interrogated. And he was like, okay, I'm just going to tell you everything that might be anything. And it's just kind of spiraled out of control. Does that even seem plausible? I mean...
Well, let's talk about that for a sec. So, by the time the Poles interrogated him, he had to have known he was going to be hung for his war crimes, because this guy committed some serious war crimes. Biggest among them, they rounded up. They were having troubles. The Nazis were having troubles with the local Jews. They were rising up, and because the Jews were basically being kept in slave labor camps, and so there were rebellions and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of trouble with them, and so they finally decided to just kill them all. And so Operation Harvest Festival was they had all these slaves come out and dig quote unquote tank trenches, defensive tank trenches, and so that's what they basically got to dig their own mass grave. And then over a period of a couple of days, they slaughtered them all and then buried them there. 43,000.
Wow.
So we're talking a seriously huge, heinous war crime here.
Yeah.
So, like I said, he wound up being stationed in Norway, where he was captured by the British. After interrogation, they decided to send him to London for further interrogation regarding his war crimes. And he was eventually extradited after the war to Poland, and he was executed by the Poles in 1952.
So it's unlikely that he would be trying to trade information for...
Well, precisely, yeah, because there's no point. He knows he's going to get shot or strung up or something.
Well, when people are inherently trying to stay alive as long as possible.
Yeah, we're optimistic.
And it's kind of a well-known fact that if I'm in custody, I might as well just start telling you everything I can, because as long as I'm talking, you got a reason to keep me alive.
It's a little Scheherazade, right?
Yeah, that's a good
Arabian
point.
Nights.
Yeah. It took me a second to make that connection.
I also just, turned a name into an adverb or adjective.
But yeah, you keep talking, you just keep giving them, even if you're just pulling it out of your backside, you just keep talking and telling them stuff, because they'll just keep writing it down and going with it.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think that would have bought him about an extra 5 minutes, but so not really worth it.
Yeah.
And he had a credibility problem there, in that he was basically his job was just to repress people and slaughter Jews and stuff like that. And so he has no credibility when it comes to talking about secret scientific things. So anyway, that's why I don't think Witkowski's story is really credible, because I don't see how Sporenberg could have been involved in any sort of scientific project. I don't see why he
seems like we've got a pretty good record of what he was doing.
Yeah, and I don't see why he would have spent any time in interrogation talking about some secret Nazi Bell thing.
Sure.
It doesn't make any sense to me. It could have happened. I mean, you never know. I mean, they might have drugged him, and it might be by this point in time he'd spent years in cells and in interrogation rooms and everything like that. Maybe he was out of his mind. I mean, by this time.
Might have cracked.
Yeah,
or maybe, solitary does awful things to people, and they just want to they'll say anything,
So, anyway, let's talk about Nick Cook for a second. He seems a little credulous, and he seems like a credible person, because he worked for Jane's Defense Weekly, and now even since then he submits articles as a contributor to Financial Times, Wall Street Journal. Not a raving loon or anything like that, but he seems a bit credulous. I came across an interview of him in the Atlantic, and this is from a ways back, and he's queried about a guy named John Hutchison. And he spends some time talking about Hutchison, and he thinks his stuff is interesting and credible and true. But Hutchison, if you do a little internet searching on the guy, he's a total crank who has claimed that he created a zero-gravity field. And he's been able to transmute metal, steel to lead, things like that, using, And what else? He says he's created a battery that has almost infinite power. He's made all these claims. He can't replicate any of these claims, and so he's universally accepted as just a lunatic crank.
So basically, what you're getting at is that Cook kind of buys in easily to maybe not the right people.
He seems, kind of, yeah. Also, in his book, he talks about Hans Kammler. We talked about that a little earlier. And he said that Hans Kammler had arranged for clemency from the Allies by trading them a lot of valuable technology.
Oh yeah.
Scientific research.
That's how the Bell supposedly came to the States.
Yeah, Hans Kammler moved the Bell to a safe spot, a hidden spot, and then negotiated with the U.S. and said, "Hey, I've got this incredible Wunderwaffe, this anti-gravity time machine device, and if you guys will," and this guy was also a war criminal, and so if you guys will forgive my sins, I'll tell you where it is, and so. That is what Cook claims, but I did a little research on Hans Kammler's biography, and he was a civil engineer, and he built a lot of things, including concentration camps. He designed and built, for example, some of the crematoriums where they gassed all the Jews. And he was involved in a lot of stuff like that. He was a competent engineer, and he rose in power, and eventually wound up being in charge of not just he was charged with building a V2 rocket production facility. And then eventually he wound up being put in charge of actually running the facility and producing V2 rockets, which were, by the way, produced with slave labor.
Of course.
One of the reasons he was very effective at it is because he was ruthless and he didn't really care about working people to death and things like that. And later on he got put in charge of aircraft also. Cook claims that Hans Kammler was in charge of all of their secret weapons programs. But that's not true. That's an exaggeration. He was in charge of rocket production and apparently aircraft production. But that's about it. He was a civil engineer. He wasn't a scientist. But Cook claims that he was in charge of all these super secret programs and that therefore he was the guy that could have traded these to the Allies, but no.
So we're saying he's not super credible, Cook.
So yeah, I would say he is not credible.
Huh.
And since he is the guy who actually popularized this theory, I mean, Igor Vitkowsky is the guy who first put it out there into the public square, but Cook is the guy who actually sold a lot more books on this whole thing. Yeah. It seems to me like Cook is a bit of a crank after all. It's like hard to believe, but apparently.
Cook is a crook.
So that's kind of the end of our theories.